What's up, Jet fans? Just finished watching Week 14, Jets at Dolphins. It was a loss. Um, Big stories going into the game where if the Jets lost, their season would mathematically be eliminated, right? We kind of knew that the season was over, but I guess there's always that very slim chance. But with a loss, they would be mathematically eliminated. And well, they lost 26-32 in overtime. Their record is now 3-10, way off than what I think most people predicted. Um, and just another tough loss, right? Overtime with a competitive Dolphins team is pretty good. The Dolphins are better than their record. Um, since Tua was out for a while and they lost most of those games. And Aaron Rodgers had a pretty good game, right? Jumping into the offense, I suppose. One touchdown, over 300 passing yards. They were out. Brees Hall was out, right? This is a very injured Jets team, especially this game. Brees Hall was out. They had their two rookie running backs who played pretty well as a combination. Um, and then looking at the receivers, right? Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams both had over 100 yards. Devontae Adams had a touchdown. Uh, yeah, Conklin was doing good, and it's just right. 26 points, I guess, is pretty good. Obviously, not good enough, and lots of those were field goals. So it was almost like they'd always get into the red zone, and then they would stall out. And so it's just very hard to figure out who to blame or what needs a fix because looking at the offense, they were without their number one running back, and they still played pretty well, but then they just lost. And this is not a new thing, right? I think this is why this team is so hard to talk about. It's like, what is the issue here? I don't know. Going into defense, they were without their superstar Sauce Gardner. Um, I mean CJ Mosley's been out for a while, but just this is a very injured defense as well. And I don't think they played that bad. Especially without Sauce Gardner. They had backup cornerbacks in. They've had a backup linebacker in for a large amount of this season, and they're just like every on the average play, I would say they're playing pretty well. And then it's that clutch time play they played terribly. And I know special teams and defense are two different things, but right, their special teams talking about clutch. The Jets went up a field goal, 50 seconds left, and then their special teams allowed the longest kickoff return in the entire game. And then the Dolphins got easy, and then the Dolphins needed to march like 20 yards to get a field goal, and they did, and they made it a tie, and then they marched straight back down in overtime to win. So, but on the average play, I really don't think this defense is playing that poorly, especially without their star cornerback, probably their best defensive player, and they held the Dolphins to I think it was like 15 points for the first half, and then they let it happen, and then the Dolphins scored, and then scored in overtime. They scored a touchdown in overtime. Um, right. This is a very powerful Dolphins offense, right? That's 32 points, and I would argue it was actually 26 points, and then overtime happened. Um, like the Dolphins are a very powerful offense. They have two top receivers. They have the announcers kept on talking up Johnny Smith, who did nothing this entire game because the Jets defense wrapped him up, and then overtime, and then he had like 3 receptions and a bunch of yards, right? And once again, I think it's important to remember that on paper the Dolphins offense is not doing that well, but that's because they were without Tua for a very long time. But these are big names players who are really good. Unlike maybe the Jets, you have a lot of big name players who maybe aren't that good. But right, it's just hard to say what is the issue here with this defense. Um, yeah, a tough loss. I'm a loss for words. And right, like I said at the top of this, Jets are officially mathematically eliminated, and that's kind of why I was talking about the players and what's wrong in general, not specifically about this game, right? Because like I said, we knew the Jets weren't making the playoffs for a while now. I think 3 of my videos have been titled "The Jets season is over" or something. But now it's mathematically true, and that does result in some reflection. But I don't know what the issue is. On paper, the Jets have a good team. Watching the average play, the Jets have a good team, and then they have 10 losses already. So maybe my scouting eye isn't as good. Maybe I'm not looking at the right stuff, but right, and I'm not going to pretend to be an offensive line scout or anything like that, the nitty gritty stuff. But watching the game, I don't think the offensive line is doing that bad. And on the average play, the Jets seem to be at worst average, but then they are just. I think you can clearly see an unclutchness, like a lack of clutch, um, from the defense, and then I think the offense does stall out a lot. But I don't know how to fix that. If that's coaching, right? Their new head coach is like 1-7 now. When they were 2-3 to start. Robert Saleh was 2-3 to start, and then he got fired. So I don't know. I'm gonna do more season recaps, I'm sure, as there's less to talk about in these games as the season becomes more and more meaningless. But I want to win. I still want to win, and I just want to see what this team can do. And with that, I maybe want to bench Aaron Rodgers for Tyrod Taylor. I think I mentioned it before, but it would be very controversial. But I think putting Tyrod Taylor in we would then be able to see we would then be able to figure out if Aaron Rodgers is the problem, right? Because if he's right, yeah. So I'm just saying maybe you Aaron Rodgers has been injured all season, so maybe you say, oh, he's too injured, you have to bench him for a little bit, put Tyrod Taylor in, see what he can do. Because if he can play really well, then it's like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is absolutely the issue. He needs to go. If he plays just as well, if the offense seems to be doing just as well, it's like, well, hold on. Then if Tyrod Taylor and Aaron Rodgers are equivalent, maybe Aaron Rodgers isn't worth $40 million. But if the offense then absolutely plummets, then it's like, okay, hold on now. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is good, and there's something wrong with this team. Um. So yeah, I'm just saying, right? Because I always want to win this season. Obviously, mathematically, you can't win anymore, but next year, I guess. And like I said, I'm going to talk more about that. Um, if you have any ideas on what's wrong with this team, let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Goodbye.